Welcome to this session on leading continuous improvement. My name is David Hurst. I'm the Deputy Operations Officer for Advance Ed. You're in a doctoral program, so you're already committed to continuous improvement, whether you really call it that or not. I have found that CQI, or continuous quality improvement, or just continuous improvement, as I'll refer to it in this session, works anytime, anywhere, and it always works if you implement it with fidelity. What you're about to participate in, you've most likely heard before in bits and pieces, or maybe you've heard it all at once. And quite honestly, you may already be an expert. Whether you are an expert or a novice, I hope you find some value in this session as we discuss continuous improvement and how to lead the process in your work, no matter what that work may be. Continuous improvement is really quite simple, and it's exceedingly complex. How can it be both of those? Well, first of all, continuous improvement is not a magic formula. You don't have to have special software. You don't have to have a powerful computer. You don't need a consultant. You don't need textbooks. It's just common sense. And yet so few people and organizations practice continuous improvement regularly in their work. I have found that leading continuous improvement is dependent upon three factors. The first factor is what W. Edwards Deming called profound knowledge. And there are two types of profound knowledge. First is your knowledge of your domain. If you're an educator, know everything that you possibly can about education. The second is the improvement process itself. Like so many things in life, anyone can engage in continuous improvement, but to do it well, you must be a dedicated student of continuous improvement. Businessman Jim Rohn once said, "Don't be a follower, be a student." What he meant was, don't blindly follow any one person's advice. Be a student. Read, listen, reflect, and learn from every source that you can find related to continuous improvement. Profound knowledge is not inherited. It's learned over many years of experience. The second factor is commitment. Commitment is necessary from you and from everyone in your organization. As the leader, you must model continuous improvement yourself. Then the other people in your organization will be more apt to follow along behind you. Continuous improvement is not a one-person job. As the leader, you cannot do continuous improvement for your organization. It's everyone's job if you really expect to see sustainable improvement in your organization's performance. There's good news and bad news about the commitment piece. The good news is you can begin today. The bad news is you'll never finish. Continuous improvement is ongoing. The third factor is focus. Remember that continuous improvement and leading that process is really a simple task. Many people make it so complex that they spend more time on the process than they do using the process. We call that getting into the weeds. If you find that you're spending more time on the process than you are using the process, step back, reflect. Find ways to keep the process simple so that you can achieve the results that you want to achieve. Before we begin our discussion of the process itself, let's do a little history lesson about where continuous improvement started. Human beings are naturally curious, always wanting to know why things are as they are and what makes things work. That natural curiosity eventually became the scientific method, defined here courtesy of Google. Aristotle and his colleagues began to investigate the nature of things and record their findings. But it was around the 17th century when men like Sir Francis Bacon, Galileo, Sir Isaac Newton began using a systematic process for their investigation and the recording of their findings. That became the process that most of us learned early in our schooling, the scientific method. Humans question everything. One of the most powerful, albeit confounding, human behaviors is always asking why. The scientific method gave us a clearly defined process to find out why. Fast forward now about 300 years, and we began to ask, is there a better way, a more efficient way, a quicker way, a less costly way, a higher quality way? This is when we began to adapt the scientific method from a tool used to satisfy our curiosity to a tool for improvement. The American Society of Quality defines continuous improvement as the ongoing improvement of products, services, or processes through incremental and breakthrough improvements. Most people credit Walter Shewhart, a statistician for Western Electric in the 1930s, as the founder of the continuous improvement model. W. Edwards Deming was a protege of Shewhart, and Joseph Juran. These two gentlemen were seminal leaders in the early development of the model. Keep track of these names, and if you have time, check out the writings of Drs. Deming and Juran. The model they developed moved the scientific method from science to industry. When I say industry, I use the word in a very Catholic sense here. That is, any one or all of these definitions provided to us by Merriam-Webster. Any type of human endeavor can benefit from the use of the continuous improvement model. Dr. Deming provided a very simple model for the process of improvement. Got a problem? Dr. Deming's model can help. Perhaps it's a bit too simplistic, but it stuck, and it became the basic foundation for the total quality management movement. We refer to this as the PDCA cycle. Some people prefer the word study instead of check, as in study the results. In your reading, you found David Langford prefers this word. So for some, it's the PDSA cycle. Really doesn't matter. It's the act of honestly evaluating the results of your actions that counts. Remember, anyone can do it, and you will find that as your profound knowledge of the process grows, you will find increasingly sophisticated ways to use it more effectively in your work. So let's design our own model of improvement, a method that is slightly more complex, but contains some of the critical components that we might miss just using these 4 items. Here's an introduction to the model, then we'll go through each step in more detail. First, and most critically, you must know the ideal state of the situation you want. This is really an addition to the PDCA model itself, but as the old saying goes, if you don't know where you're going, anywhere you wind up will be fine. As we strive to achieve that desired state, we identify problems along the way. Defining that problem as clearly as possible will save time and effort, and that requires collecting data. To help define the problem more fully, we'll use an analysis tool called root cause analysis. Once we've determined the real cause of the problem, we'll design and implement a simple action plan to address it. During and after the implementation of the plan, we again gather data and examine the results. This is the check or study part of the PDSA cycle. From there, we determine if we've conquered the problem, in which case we standardize the findings into our daily work, or if we need to try again, we re-examine the issue and implement an alternative plan. Before we dive into our discussion of each step of the continuous improvement process, I'd like to ask you to ingrain 2 words into your brain: systematic and systemic. You will hear and read the word system and words related to system a lot in continuous improvement literature. The weather cycle we all learned in school is a system and a process. Water evaporates, it rises, it cools, it rains, and the process starts over again. For the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to provide my own definitions of systems and processes. A system is a group of people and processes working toward a common goal to produce a product or result. A process is a systematic set of actions that produces a product or result. Let's examine the words systematic and systemic a little more deeply. Systematic means process-driven, step-by-step, and standardized. Usually, systematic processes are documented or written down so that everyone engages in the process the same way every time. Systemic is a little less tangible, but it means we use our systematic process wherever and whenever it is needed, and that the process can be used at all levels of work in the organization. All right, let's begin our brief tour through the steps of continuous improvement. Before you proceed with any improvement task, you have to know where you're headed. This may be the most important concept in this entire discussion. I can tell you this, it's part of the process we pay all too little attention to. Making sure the ideal is defined is a leadership task. That doesn't mean that others can't be involved, but it requires leadership. Other parts of the process may require oversight by leaders, but the leader's role in defining the ideal situation is critical. I use the words ideal or vision or goal almost synonymously. You may not be comfortable doing that, and that's okay. But whatever word you use, it should answer the question, what are the characteristics of our desired or ideal outcome? Keep in mind, you can have many of these vision statements in your organization. You can have a statement that describes what you want your school or business to be. But you can also have other statements that paint a clear and compelling picture of the ideal outcome of whatever you're attempting to improve. My father used to tell a story about a prince that had a deformity that kept him from standing straight. He dreamed of being straight and tall. He desired it so much that he hired the best sculptor in the kingdom to carve in stone an exact likeness of himself, but standing up perfectly straight. Every day, without fail, he would walk into the garden, look up at his face on the statue. He did it day in and day out for years and years, until one day he realized he was looking eye to eye with the statue. You can achieve almost anything if you clearly describe the outcome and refer to that definition over and over. For those of you outside the United States, this next example may not be as meaningful, but I encourage all of you to listen to Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Just search the web for the I Have a Dream speech. That speech epitomizes a clear and compelling vision or ideal outcome statement. It's powerful. In that speech, Dr. King painted a compelling picture so clearly that it could not be misinterpreted. My colleagues at a consulting firm refer to this as your HDD, High Definition Destination. The word compelling is critical here. Think of it in terms of the 3 whats. You know the 3 whats, right? What must we do? So what? And now what? Once you've defined the problem, if people respond, so what? It's not compelling. If they get a little more emotional, or if they get a lot emotional, you're probably on the right track. Your ideal could be as multifaceted as Dr. King's speech, or it could be as simple as a goal for your class. But it must be complete. Don't get hung up on the differences between visions and missions and those other types of words. Describe what you want as completely and accurately as you can. That leads us to the next topic, clarity. You will find it much more difficult to achieve your goal or vision if your description is not clear. Simply put, you need an operational definition that defines how you will measure your desired outcome. There can be no gray areas. Why are these operational definitions so important? Well, they provide guidance. They help people understand what you're trying to achieve. They save time and money because each person knows their job and what is acceptable. Operational definitions are vital for teamwork. They provide clear explanations for terms. They eliminate waste, and they provide a foundation for your improvement. We've defined where we want to go, but how do we get there? To draw that map, we have to know where we are. Let's move to the next step in our process, defining reality. Really? Isn't reality really reality? Well, of course it is. And it seems there are always problems that need our attention. David Langford prefers to use the word probabilities. It's not hard to see that he's created a portmanteau of problem and opportunity, and it may sound a little silly, but it's effective. He is really expressing the culture of continuous improvement. When we see something as a problem, it affects our mood, and we begin to place blame and to worry. In your reading, Victoria Bernhardt talked about dealing with the things that we have control over. Those are the only things we can change. We'll get a little deeper into this in just a moment. Data gathering must be complete and from multiple sources, but not over the top. You may be familiar with the term triangulation of data. I've heard it expressed as strangulation of data, especially when we have more data than we can use. Using data from multiple sources will help you make good decisions. But don't collect data for the sake of collecting data. Don't collect more data than you have time and capacity to analyze fully. You've probably heard people say, we're data rich and information poor. They've spent so much time collecting data, they don't have time to analyze it. And without analysis, data is not particularly valuable. And that leads to the next point. The old saying is true, honesty is the best policy. Face the reality as told by the data. Not facing the data with honesty and integrity most often results in continued failure. And don't be lulled into a soft solution here. Remember that in dealing with humans, perception is reality. We need to make sure we have a backup plan to the way that we think things are. In fact, there are two words I want you to strike from your continuous improvement vocabulary right now. Those two words are think and believe. When you hear someone say, I believe our students are great readers, take caution. Odds are they don't really know for sure. Replace your I think and I believe with I know based on data. Let's talk about gap. Know where you are, know where you're headed. The gap is that abyss over which you must build a bridge from where you are to where you want to be. As you examine the gaps, remember your ideal outcome. Dr. Deming said, create a constancy of purpose. And don't lose sight of the ancillary operational definitions that help you to determine your ideal outcome. Let's dig a little deeper into data gathering and control. Harry Wong used to say, we don't choose who we teach who gets off the bus. You may not be able to alter curriculum or even change assessments. Hey, just try calling up the college board one day and tell them you'd like to change some questions on their test. Here's the thing. You can't let your colleagues use lack of control as an excuse. If you can't control a particular area, accept that you can't control it and find ways to mitigate the situation using the things that you can control. What we can control almost always are processes. That is, what people and machines do or don't do and how they do it. Alignment is another area of control. We can't always control alignment, but we can usually find a way to work around a lack of it. We see this most often in a lack of alignment between curriculum and instruction or curriculum and assessment. I always stifle a giggle when I hear people say, I don't teach to the test. Well, I have news for you. If you don't teach what will be tested, the outcomes can be, shall we say, less than ideal. In order to define gaps accurately and determine what we can and cannot do, we have to pay attention to the quality of our data collection. Good data collection will reduce emotional responses and excuses, and it will also provide leverage for your discussion with those in control of the areas that you don't control. Let's move to the next step in our process, identifying root cause. On our first slide, we noted that it is the human condition to ask why. Children start doing this as soon as they can speak. Root cause analysis makes us keep digging until we get to the root of the problem. In most situations, there will be more than one root cause. Sometimes the causes may be related to processes that aren't working well. Other times, it could be that our processes aren't aligned. And don't be fooled by just taking care of the symptoms. If you are a parent, you know aspirin will make your sick child feel better, but it won't cure the disease. Aspirin addresses the symptom. We need something else to address the cause. I've seen so many schools tackle the problem of attendance and waste so much time and effort by not applying root cause analysis. Invariably, they say, let's reward students who have perfect attendance, and that will cause students to attend more regularly. Hey, I did it when I was a principal and found out after a while that it didn't work very well. This is a classic example of treating the symptom, not the cause. If those schools had done their due diligence, they would have found that the root cause for most students was that they didn't find school very valuable or interesting. Root cause analysis is a critical part of the decision-making process in continuous improvement. There are a lot of terms for this decision-making process. I've listed 3 of them here. And the 5 Whys is not a 1960s rock and roll band, it's a tool. You saw the 5 Whys in David Langford's work, and you saw the dichotomous rubric in Lee Jenkins' book. These are decision-making models using root cause. Let's take a look at a problem and use the 5 Whys to get to root cause. We've looked at our data, and we find that our students don't read very well. So we ask the question, why don't they read very well? We immediately find that there are at least 2 answers. The first one is, some don't speak English as their first language. Certainly that could be a problem. We also find that many don't comprehend what they read. Well, let's look at the ones that don't speak English as their first language. Is there an intervention? Is there a strategy that we could use to bring those children along more quickly so that their reading level increases? Well, of course there is. So for this group of students, we've gotten to the root cause. But when we counted the number of students, we found it was only 15% of the total. What about the rest of them that don't comprehend? So we ask why again. Why don't students comprehend what they read? And we find that there are probably 3 answers to that particular why. First of all, some students have a limited vocabulary. Others can't make inferences. Still others have difficulty decoding words and phrases. If we ask why again about the students that have a limited vocabulary, what we determined is the vocabulary we expected students to know was not taught in the previous grade. Is there an intervention or a strategy that we could use to make sure that those words are covered in the previous grade? Of course. Now let's look at the students who are having difficulty decoding words and phrases. If we ask why are they having difficulty decoding words and phrases, and we look at all of our evidence, what we find is many of these students have a learning disability. Is there a way that we could bring in a specialist to help students with this learning disability? The answer is of course. However, now we're still only up to 45% of our students. What about the other 55%? And so we ask why yet another time. And what we find is that students don't have the skills to make inferences. A simple examination tells us we haven't taught them the skills they need to make inferences yet, and so now we're down to our final root cause, and we've addressed the needs of 100% of our students. Could it be that we would need to ask why more times? Well, most certainly it could. We need to keep asking why until all of our students are accounted for. It doesn't have to be 5 times. It could be 2 times, or it could be 20 times. Now we know that we have discovered at least 4 reasons our students aren't reading well. Let's build some action plans to address those 4 problems. The first point to understand is that action plans must be simple. They should be written down and no more than 1 page if possible. Hey, 1 classroom and we've already got 4 issues that we need to take care of. We can't write a 100-page plan for each one of those 4 problems. We need to get the job done quickly and efficiently. A 1-page plan is all that's necessary to address problems like this. We've seen so many schools and school systems build improvement plans that have hundreds of pages. This goes back to the issue we talked about earlier. These people are spending more time on planning than they are on actually taking care of the problem. Keep it to 1 page, if at all possible. Next, let's look at the critical components that must be included if we want our action plan to be successful. First, we have to detail the tasks that must be done. For each one of those tasks, we have to assign a particular person to make sure that the job gets done. We also have to set a timeline. When will the job be complete? and what resources are necessary in order for us to complete the job. Finally, how will we evaluate whether or not this task was completed the way it should have been completed? If we leave any of these critical components out, we run the risk of our action plan failing. Let's look at a sample of an action plan. Here's a typical action plan, simplified just a bit to fit on this slide, but all the important components are there. This is in fact a real action plan that we're using in our office right now, one of many that we have in place to help us provide better service. Our data showed us that status changes in our online system were accurately made by staff only about 93% of the time. 93% may sound pretty good unless you're one of the 7% that get mislabeled. We sat down as a team and brainstormed the tasks that would need to be completed if we wanted our offices around the world to be more accurate more often. We listed those tasks in the order they had to happen and assigned a specific person to make sure the task was completed accurately and on time. Under Owner, notice that we listed people's names, not just a generic term like our team. I'm sure you've heard the old story about anybody, everybody, somebody, and nobody. There was a task to be done. Anybody could have done it. Everybody thought somebody would do it. As a result, nobody did it. Don't let this be you. Assign the names. It raises people's level of concern when they see their name on a written plan. There are hundreds of plan templates available. I've provided a template that we use at Advance Ed for our action plans in your workspace, and you're welcome to use it. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. But no matter whose template you use, keep it simple. All right, we've implemented our plan and we've gathered some data. Now it's time for analysis. You should analyze data from two perspectives. First, determine if you achieved the results you wanted. And second, evaluate how well you use the continuous improvement process. When you look at outcomes, ask questions like, did we improve? Did we achieve our goal or our ideal outcome? If not, which parts did we achieve? Which parts did we fall short on? What are the possible causes that kept us from achieving our goal? When it comes to the process, ask questions such as, did we implement our plan with integrity and fidelity? Did we define our ideal outcome correctly? Did we gather the right data? Did we define our gaps correctly? Did we choose the right measures of success in our operational definitions? What about root causes? Were our plans clear, and did we include all the activities necessary to properly implement the plans? This is yet another time that the root cause analysis tool can be helpful. Now it's time to make a decision. Remember the three whats? What, so what, and now what? The what was the gap we found between where we are and where we want to be. The so what was the reason we created such a compelling vision of where we wanted to be that everyone jumped on board and we implemented a plan. Well, the results are in, and for the now what, we need to put one of Lee Jenkins' dichotomous rubrics in place. If we didn't meet our goal, it's time to refine, refocus, and redo. If we did meet our goal, it's time to standardize the practices. Let's deal with the former first. So it didn't quite work out like we planned it. That's good news. Now you know what doesn't work, so you won't do that again. You remember the story about Thomas Edison and the electric light? When he'd failed to create the electric bulb, people asked how it felt to fail so many times. Edison supposedly replied, "I haven't failed at all. We now know thousands of ways not to make an electric light bulb." Ask your team these questions, and it goes back to root cause. Were our expectations unrealistic? Did we have good data to define our problem? Did we choose correctly between process and alignment activities? Did we implement our plan with fidelity? You can ask even more questions to get down to the real root cause of why you didn't achieve what you anticipated. What if we did reach our goal? Hey, this is a win-win. If we didn't reach our goal, it was good news because we discovered something that didn't work. If we did achieve our goal, All we have to do is standardize the practice. Well, there's good news and there's bad news about that too. The good news, of course, is that you achieved the goal. Don't forget to celebrate. In this fast-paced world we live in today, we usually don't take the time to really enjoy our successes before we dive into the next problem. But standardizing new practices isn't quite as easy as it sounds. People aren't always willing to accept change, even when it's for the better. We have 4 types of people. We have dependents who say, just tell me what I have to do. They're not excited about the success, they just want to trudge along their merry way. Then we have bystanders, people who say, I think I'll just hang out for a bit and maybe this will go away. Then we have procrastinators, those people who say, I don't have time to do it now, I'll worry about it tomorrow. And of course there's always the cynic. It was luck. It won't work for everyone. Hey, we tried this back in the 60s. It didn't work then. Well, to overcome this, each person must realize their role, and each person must publicly admit that role and then choose from one of 3 options. They can renounce their former role and adopt the continuous improvement philosophy, or they can agree to do their share and not impede the progress of the organization, or of course, they can always leave. Once we have this out of the way, we can get down to truly standardizing, or sometimes we use the word institutionalizing, our new practices. First, everyone must be informed about why we're standardizing the new process and the importance of standardization. This takes place in training. Next, we have to continually evaluate people and the process to make sure the new process is being carried out correctly. We also have to keep an eye on the environment. Changes outside our organization can impact even the best changes that we put into place. Finally, we have to practice a phrase I've come to love over the years, selective abandonment. There's just not enough time in the day to do all the things we used to do and the things that we found that make things better. Given the choice, we should choose the latter and say goodbye to some of those practices that are near and dear to our hearts. It's hard work, but it can be done, and the payoff is enormous. Let's wind up this discussion with some final thoughts. The model that I've shared with you is a systemic model. Remember, the definition says that in a systemic model, it can be used wherever and whenever it's needed. This process is generic. It can be used in just such a way. Think about for a moment in the education industry. Can you use the model that you've learned about today at the system level or the district level? Can you use it at the building level? Could you use it at the department level and even at the classroom level? What about the student level or the teacher level? The answer to all those questions is yes. It can be used at all of these levels, and it should be used at all of those levels if you really want to make significant impact on the performance of your organization. Remember the old saw, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. If we teach our students to manage their own continuous improvement, then you ensure their success for a lifetime. I always like to share a few of the myths and legends that exist about continuous improvement. I hear so many educators say, continuous improvement came from business. We're not a business, we're educators. I also hear people say, there is only one right way to do continuous improvement. Usually it's their way. Not everyone has to be involved in continuous improvement. If everyone's not involved, continuous improvement simply won't take place. The continuous improvement won't work everywhere. Well, I'm getting on up in years now, and I haven't found a place that it doesn't work. My favorite is probably, we're good enough. Why should we improve? There is always room for improvement. I urge you to commit today to practice a systematic continuous improvement process, whether it's this one or one of your own design. and then use that process systematically in all of your work. You'll be amazed at the results.